This is CBC Vancouver News.
Remembering, honoring, and reflecting.
Remembrance Day means quite a bit for me, actually. Lost a lot of people, actually, that I served with.
From the coast to the north to the interior to the Kootenays.
Right now we have places in Gaza, in Israel, the Middle East, the Far East. Nothing has changed.
Marking Remembrance Day in BC while war unfolds overseas.
We honor the people that came before us, that fought for our country, and we still honor the people that still fight.
Also tonight, a 12-hour standoff, a building up in flames, police vehicles burned, and a man presumed dead. What happened at this rural farm in Langley that has BC's police watchdog involved. And
power went out about 3 times, and the wind felt like it was going to take my house away.
A wicked storm wallops the south coast, leaving nearly 250,000 homes without power and crews with a big cleanup. Good evening, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Thanks for joining us on this November 11th. Today was a day of remembrance in this country, a day of reflection to honor those who fought for our freedom. And this year, a particularly powerful Remembrance Day with war on the forefront overseas. We begin our coverage at Vancouver's Victory Square. Our Sorab Sandhu was among the thousands at today's ceremony.
Veterans marched proudly through the streets of downtown Vancouver as hundreds lined up on the streets cheered them on. 100-year-old veteran Percival Smith came to honor the memory of his fallen comrades one more time.
It's about the thousands of servicemen and women who didn't come back.
Veterans from the Chinese-Canadian community who volunteered to fight in the Second World War were acknowledged.
About 150 British Columbians of Chinese-Canadian origin served in Force 136. And additionally, about 700 to 800 served in the Royal Canadian Navy, the Canadian Army, and the Royal Canadian Air Force.
And as veterans reflected on Canada's past, there is also concern about ongoing armed conflicts in other parts of the world.
We now face with continued Russian aggression in Ukraine and the tragedy unfolding between Palestine and Israel.
More than anything else, I think it's the amount of civilians who just died for no reason at all.
Smith says his compatriots fought for a better world, often facing hardships and surviving in substandard conditions. But the recent increase in violence brings back those painful memories of the past.
There have been disruptions in every part of the world. And right now we have places in Gaza, in Israel, the Middle East, the Far East. Nothing has changed.
Some attendees came to honor loved ones they lost to the war.
Like Remembrance Day, when I even live in Europe, that's very important because my grandpa was in the Second World War and I always remember.
We always come over here on this day because we always want to remember our father, that they fought on the war for
a better future.
While young Canadians found inspiration from the ceremony.
It fills me with a lot of hope and joy for our generation that we are continuing the tradition.
Sorab Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
In Victoria, thousands also crowded around the cenotaph on the front lawn of the BC Legislature. Speeches reflected on the sacrifices so many Canadians have made and continue to make, with many reflecting on the wars happening around the world right now. Wreaths were laid in the provincial capital and right across Vancouver Island. To southeastern BC, where hundreds gathered at Cranbrook's Rotary Park as well. Our Corey Bullock was at that ceremony and has more on how Remembrance Day is being reflected there.
A rainy day in Cranbrook didn't stop hundreds of people from gathering to honor veterans and those who have made the ultimate sacrifice, including resident Amy McDonald.
I miss my father. Yeah. He served in The Royal Canadian Air Force, yeah, and it was an electrician with flight simulators.
A color party led the march to the cenotaph before prayers, song, and a moment of silence. For some, it brought back memories.
A lot of time away from home. There's no denying that. I saw my daughter for only 10 days of her whole first year.
And as the rain poured down, it washed away tears.
Remembrance Day means quite a bit for me, actually. Lost a lot of people, actually, that I served with in various exercises. And I lost a brother, actually, who had just gotten in, and his funeral day was actually on Remembrance Day. So it means a lot for me.
Members of the Cranbrook Legion organized the event to honor their brothers and sisters.
It means freedom. It means we honor the people that came before us, that fought for our country. And we still honor the people that still fight, and we honor the ones that serve peace as well.
She says the support from the community is what makes the service possible.
We have one of the most successful poppy campaigns in all of BC for the size of our community, financially, as well as support for the service today and the support for the Legion.
And Richard says while we honor veterans, it's also a day to celebrate.
And it's nice to see everybody celebrating the fact that we have the right and the freedoms to enjoy each other and celebrate this day.
Lest we forget. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Cranbrook.
Remembrance Day was marked in every pocket of the province today. In Prince George, upwards of 2,000 people filled several city blocks surrounding the cenotaph outside City Hall. The ceremony had been in jeopardy because of a lack of funding, but was saved last minute by an anonymous $18,000 donation. Meanwhile, in Kamloops, crowds turned out for a local event there as well, including a flyover by the 419 Tactical Fighter Training Squadron of the Royal Canadian Air Force. And in Kelowna, the rain held off just enough for a ceremony that also drew thousands to the waterfront downtown. Each year, the Okanagan Military Museum Society sets up fields of crosses in the park as a visual representation of the 220 names on the Kelowna cenotaph. Organizers say the project is an interactive way for families to reflect on the loss of our fallen heroes. And an especially solemn ceremony in Ottawa today as well, with war unfolding on the other side of the world top of mind right now. Canada's top soldier urged greater preparation in the face of rising global security threats. The CBC's Ashley Burke has more from the nation's capital.
These are the faces of those who understand the cost of war. This year's Remembrance Day ceremony even more poignant for them as they watch two major conflicts abroad unfold.
I look at the way the world is now. I'm completely thankful that I live in Canada.
The Israel-Hamas war and Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine, constant reminders of the fragility of peace.
And how hard we have to work together to secure that.
I don't think we should ever take that for granted.
Paul Baden says he spent more than 8,000 hours in the air during the Cold War chasing Soviet submarines. Russia's invasion, he says, shows the threat remains.
It's scary. I thought we were going to put all that behind us, and unfortunately we haven't. And consequently, I don't envy my children growing up and my grandchildren these days.
The federal government is looking to cut almost $1 billion from the Defense Department's annual budget at a time when Canada's top soldier says he's very concerned about the deteriorating security situation around the world.
The study of our military history could almost be considered a study in unpreparedness. Well, we see the challenges that are out there. We see them coming. We have to be ready. We have to ensure that we can respond to this very, very uncertain and insecure world.
That insecure world underscores the need to remember lessons from the past and work to prevent them from happening again. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
It's a common lament on Remembrance Day how veterans of Canada's wars have been lost to the passage of time. But some who fought in World War I are being heard again thanks to a history project in London, Ontario. The CBC's Eva Musa explains.
When Robert Mason enlisted for military service,
Richard Janicki has received a message from the past. It's a reproduction of a postcard sent by soldier Robert Mason more than a century ago. Originally mailed to Janicki's house, where Mason's family once lived.
It has a lot of history to it. It was a moment where we got to connect with the history of this house and this community.
Once we've decided it's a usable postcard, we can fix it to be able to get it through.
History professor Jonathan Vance and a small team of researchers at Western University sent hundreds of reproductions of First World War postcards to the Canadian addresses that originally received them, to give those living there now a glimpse into life during the war.
The postcards remind people that men and women who served in uniform, who died overseas, they lived in the houses we know. They walked on the streets that we know. They went to the schools and the churches we know.
Vance says the contents of the postcards are light and affectionate, rarely focusing on the brutalities of war.
They wanted to know exactly what was going on at home, because that was a way to root themselves in their own family, in their own past, their own experience. So you get everything from birth of new kittens to we're putting an addition on the shed.
And we assume the house is super.
Riley Brooks helped Vance make sure the reproductions reached homes that still exist.
A lot of love went into this project. Connecting the past to the present is one of the most fascinating things ever. And I just hope Canadians take a second to, think about the past, especially on Remembrance Day.
Janicki says Mason's postcard brings to mind the wars raging today and their impact on those who cannot escape.
I think it provides more of an opportunity to reflect the millions of families that are lost through the act of war. I think of those moments as well.
So does Jonathan Vance.
It's a good way for people to remember how fortunate they are that these sorts of things aren't happening in our neighborhoods, in our country, and maybe to not take so much for granted.
Vance says he hopes those who received a reproduction postcard will reflect on that, as well as the sacrifices and service of Canada's veterans. Eva Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, significant rainfall and strong winds battered much of BC's coast over the past 24 hours. In total, power was knocked out to nearly 250,000 homes province-wide last night. And as Janella Hamilton reports, roughly 15,000 customers are still in the dark tonight.
We had all hands on deck. We used all our available BC Hydro crews and contractor crews.
The storm knocked down countless trees, causing significant damage to power lines and electrical equipment. BC Hydro says crews have been working non-stop to get power back up and running for the tens of thousands still left in the dark Saturday. More than half of all power outages in BC are because of falling trees, and this year trees are especially vulnerable.
When you compare this season to previous seasons, with the drought conditions at play, we are seeing more outages on the system.
Surrey was the hardest hit, with Langley, Port Coquitlam and Maple Ridge also bearing the brunt of the storm in the lower mainland. Winds were clocked at nearly 100 kilometers an hour in some coastal areas.
Power went out about 3 times and the wind felt like it was going to take my house away.
Bernice Hill, who lives on the Sunshine Coast, says the strong winds toppled a lot of trees and branches near her home in Gibson. She could even see sparks coming from power transformers as they blew out.
The wind is a very scary thing.
That wind causing the cancellation of 60 sailings across 12 routes Friday evening. But by Saturday morning, BC Ferry says it was back to normal with minimal delays.
We have seen some overloads, most notably on the major routes, and that was to be expected due to the cancellations last evening, as well as it is a long weekend.
We are looking at trees like this that do have the potential of either being drought weakened or damaged.
Both BC Hydro and BC Ferry say fall storms always pack a punch and leave crews preparing for what else is to come.
With the recent dry and drought conditions, we have increased our vegetation management program, and we do the proper pruning that needs to be done to ensure that they don't encroach into our power lines.
Environment Canada has put out a winter storm warning with heavy snow expected on the mountain passes overnight. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
A man is believed to be dead after a large-scale police operation in Langley near the U.S. border that stretched on for more than 12 hours. 2 police vehicles wound up torched after an RCMP tactical squad and a number of officers were deployed yesterday. It started with calls of a distraught person at this rural property around 10 a.m. When Mounties arrived, they heard gunshots. They called for backup, and the emergency response team tried all day to communicate with the man who barricaded himself inside. Eventually, by 11 p.m., a fire erupted and flames engulfed the building. The man inside is presumed dead. A body has yet to be recovered, though, as it's still not safe enough to comb the scene. The smoking ruins of several vehicles were still smoldering on the property today, including 2 police cars. BC's police watchdog is now investigating. Well, 2 men have been seriously hurt in a shooting near a mall in Coquitlam. Gunshots were reported in this TD Bank parking lot shortly before 10 o'clock last night. They found 2 men who'd been shot. Both were rushed to the hospital with critical injuries. It's unclear whether this was a targeted shooting or whether those involved knew each other. But Coquitlam RCMP are asking any witnesses with information to call police. And in sports, the BC Lions season is over.
As Winnipeg gets the job done and books a ticket to Hamilton to take on the Montreal Alouettes in the Grey Cup.
The Lions lost today in the Western Final against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Lions quarterback Vernon Adams Jr. was sacked 9 times in total. The final score, 24-13. Winnipeg will take on the Montreal Alouettes now in the Grey Cup. They defeated the Toronto Argonauts this afternoon. The Grey Cup will be played next Sunday in Hamilton, Ontario. After the break, fuel has run out at Gaza's largest hospital. The implications with the Israeli military now surrounding Gaza City. That's next. To the latest in the Middle East now, and as fighting intensifies around Gaza's largest hospital, Israel's military says it will help evacuate babies from the facility tomorrow. It denies accusations it is targeting the hospital and blames Hamas for staging its operations nearby this week. The CBC's Briar Stewart is in Jerusalem with the latest.
Fighting has been intense around hospitals in northern Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry says that fuel ran out at Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa, and 2 babies died after a generator was shut off. We reached the head of the plastic surgery department at the hospital, who said there was no electricity and they had to stop performing most operations. As Dr. Ahmad Mokhalalati spoke to us, the sounds of explosions and gunfire could be heard in the background.
We have a commitment towards our patients. We have 63, I think, patients in the ICU with ventilators. They have to evacuate them to places where the ventilators will be provided.
Israel's military says it isn't laying siege to the hospital, but it's targeting Hamas militants. It says that it's been urging civilians to evacuate the area for weeks, and that in the last 3 days, more than 150,000 have headed south along humanitarian corridors. Tomorrow, Israel says it will help to evacuate some of the most critical and vulnerable patients still inside Al-Shifa.
The staff of the Shifa hospital has requested that tomorrow we will help the babies in the pediatric department to get to a safer hospital. We will provide the assistance needed.
According to the Hamas-run health ministry, more than 11,000 have been killed since October 7th. That's the day Hamas militants attacked Israel, killing 1,200 people and taking around 240 hostages, including infants. The government says bringing back the hostages is its priority, and tonight hundreds marched in Tel Aviv demanding the release. Israel wants the world to remember the heinous Hamas crimes, given that there is mounting global outrage over the dire situation in Gaza. Israel said it won't stop until it eliminates Hamas and issued a warning to Hezbollah as the group vows to step up attacks in northern Israel. Tonight, Israel's defense minister said that the group is playing with fire, and he warned that, quote, what we can do in Gaza, we can also do in Beirut. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Jerusalem.
In Iceland, thousands of people are being told to evacuate after a series of hundreds of earthquakes in the southwest. The fear is that the large number of tremors signals an impending volcanic eruption. Scientists say it's not clear how big an eruption would be or whether there will even be one at all, but officials have declared a state of emergency. You are looking at a live shot of the Georgia Viaduct in BC Place, lit up in red for Remembrance Day. Well, stormy weather is subsiding on the coast, making way for wintry weather in other places. We'll have the details in the 5-day forecast next. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On December 7th, join CBC Vancouver's Dan Burrett at the Alumni UBC webinar, Finding Joy in Climate Action. Experts will discuss what climate actions we can take that could also impact our well-being. And enjoy the seasonal celebration of quiet reflection and jubilant hope with Christmas with Corleone on December 15th, 16th, and 18th. Tickets at corleone.org.
Let's take a look at the 5-day forecast, and we'll start with our current temperatures. A little bit chilly, especially in those places where the precipitation is still coming down. In Whistler, that could be translating into snow. -3 is the overnight low. Still warm enough, though, on the island where that will still just be coming down as rain. Here's our forecast, though, as we see this move across overnight and into tomorrow. You can see as that moisture moves through off the Pacific. Any of those purple areas or white areas, it's coming down as snow. Pink is a mix of rain and snow, and otherwise just rain. So we will see that snow translate through the higher mountain passes. We actually have a couple of snowfall alerts, winter weather warnings in effect for the mountain passes. So this affects the Coquitlam, the Hope Princeton, and parts of the Trans-Canada as well through the Rogers Pass. And that means we could see up to 40 centimeters of snow in some parts overnight in those higher elevations, and low visibility as well. So do be careful if you are driving this weekend. Here's how we're looking for tomorrow. And actually, despite that, we're well above seasonal in many areas, including the interior. Look at Kamloops, 12 degrees. Average high is only 5 for this time of year, so doing quite well with the temperatures. Here's the 5-day forecast for Metro Vancouver. Fairly typical for November. We'll see some rain continue tomorrow, off and on showers, and then we'll dry out and keep the temperatures relatively stable through the week. That is your late news for this Saturday, November 11th. For news anytime, anywhere, download the free CBC News app. You can always find us online as well. We're at cbc.ca/BC. We leave you tonight with images from Remembrance Day ceremonies across Vancouver today. Have a great night.